Today, we're making the pan sword. Hook came out when I was 10 years old, and it was amazing. It had everything a little boy could want. There were sword fights and flying and the coolest guy on the planet in the 90s, Rufio. This past weekend, I met the actor that played Rufio, Dante Basco, and in anticipation of this momentous occasion, I decided to make a replica of the sword. Now it should be said that I am not a proper sword maker. Making a great sword requires specialty equipment to get the heat treatment just right. Forging hilts and pommels requires blacksmith's equipment or casting equipment that I don't currently have access to. Also, sword blades are made of special materials that are often hard to come by. However, the pan sword is a very simple sword. That means I can use the skills and equipment I have to make a pretty good replica of it, at least visually speaking. There is a bit of an irony with me making a video about making the pan sword, given that Tony Swatton, the man that does Man-at-Arms, probably made the original. It's his first feature film that he worked on. By the way, if you're not watching Man-at-Arms yet, what are you doing here? Go watch him! The first challenge with making a replica prop like this is getting the scale. I had to pull frames from the movie and guess based on the proportions of people and how the sword laid against them, how big it was. I worked out that it was about 1.25 inches wide and about 32 inches long. That made it a convenient size because 1.25 inch steel bar is a fairly standard stock item at metal supply stores. Making the blade for the pan sword is pretty easy. I carved out the rough profile on a bandsaw, and then it was just a matter of patience and grinding on a belt sander for a good chunk of an afternoon. Once the shape I wanted had been ground in, I used progressively finer belts on the belt sander to smooth out the surface and add polish. To get the slight gold color that the pan sword has, I baked it in a conventional oven. You can actually get a pretty deep gold brassy color on steel by baking it between 375 and 400 degrees for a few hours. For the hilt, I used a coconut. Now in the film, if you look closely, it's clearly not a coconut, but from a distance it really looks like the sword has a cup hilt made of a coconut shell. The grip was also pretty easy. I used 1.25 inch dowel, which I ripped in half on a table saw. The grip is held onto the blade by using 2 dowels that go through holes in both the grips and the blade and are friction fit in place. As a finishing touch, I brought it to the convention this weekend and got Dante Basco to sign it. His review of the blade when he held it is that it's a bit bigger and heavier than the one he used in the movie. However, there were several versions of the sword, so he says it's pretty close to the right area. It might have been a bit narrower and the handle might have been a bit shorter. As always, subscribe above and leave suggestions for future episodes in comments below.